Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Sandy Farlow. I am one of the worship associates and part of the team that is working to bring this service to you wherever you may be. I'm glad you're joining us for worship here in the sanctuary or online. I know that last week was a bit of a scramble to get us all, set up again for this week. It seems we're just to push everything a week forward. I don't know if you were all able to do that in your lives. I'm retired and I still don't know what day it is. So, as we say in Kansas, ad astra per aspera, to the stars through difficulty. Here at Community UU Church, our mission is nourishing spirits working for justice and transforming lives. We seek to examine spiritual questions individually and with others, and to educate all ages by promoting ethics, a sense of morality, and the pursuit of personal and shared truth. We strive to serve and work together to make our world a more compassionate, more just, and more respectful place. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here. So, we are so fortunate to have our old friend Bill Holston here today. I consider Bill Holston, yes. I consider Bill not just one of my mentors, but a great influence to this whole church in its growing awareness of our responsibilities in the world outside our walls. His is a clear voice calling the community in which he lives to account on matters of economic inequality, LGBTQIA rights, racial inequity, ecology, immigrant issues, and political skullduggery. This guy, you, Bill, are an example par excellence of living your life as a social advocate. And he is great company, easy to talk to and kind and wise and has a wicked sense of humor. So this month, our worship theme has been equity, and I cannot think of a better partner with whom to explore this theme. Our call to worship this morning is written by Maureen Killoran. We come together without creed. In this free church, we come together without creed, focusing instead on the core values of justice, equity, and compassion, of mutual acceptance of our diverse ways of being as we seek to connect ourselves more fully with the unfolding truths of life in our world. We come together in shared conviction that all people deserve a voice in matters that concern them, and that it is up to each of us to protect the rights of all, particularly those who, for whatever reason, have long been held in silence. We come together in the stubborn belief that community is possible and that peace is more than a dream. We commit together to affirm in our actions as well as our words the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. We come together in awareness of our interdependence with all humanity and with the wider web of existence, for that too is a part of what we mean by we. In this free church, we come together without creed, believing that the way we live in the world bears testament to the value of our beliefs. Tricia?
We light this chalice as a beacon of hope for all who have gathered here this day, for all who have ever walked through our doors, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those whose paths may never come our way. For all this, and for all those things we dare to hope and dream and work for, we kindle our chalice flame this day.
And each week we make this promise to one another. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. Come on up, Tim. So this is our friend Tim. How long have you been coming here, Tim?
Probably mid last year, a little bit after that.
Yeah, I think so. He shares his time with us in the Quakers. I like that about him. He's very particular about when we talk about when can Tim be here. He's like, no, that's my Quaker Sunday. So I love that he does that. And this is a story that he's written to share with us.
I believe very strongly that whether we're big or small, the big feelings we have inside should be taken very seriously. So this is a story about a little girl and her big feelings. Brave for you. Little Siggy stayed up late playing in the living room. There were cookies and tea and her red panda toy, Ollie. Little Siggy was very sleepy after playing. She fell asleep so fast, she didn't even remember going to bed. Boom! A thunderstorm had started while she was sleeping. Wind and rain howled outside of her window. Siggy heard the walls shake. She saw her fairy nightlight flicker. Her heart was hurting her chest. She pulled her covers over her head. She reached out for Ollie. Siggy gasped. Ollie wasn't in the bed with her. Where was he? She didn't like being scared all by herself. The pictures on her wall rattled. She saw bright flashes of lightning through her blanket. She closed her eyes tightly. Siggy curled into a little ball under her blanket. Her breath was stuck. Thunder yelled again. She imagined the sky breaking. Siggy! A shaky voice called over the storm. She opened her eyes. Help me. That small, shaky voice was almost too tiny to hear over the big, loud storm. Siggy pulled down the blanket from over her head and looked around. Outside her open bedroom door, she saw the living room where she had her cookies and tea. And she saw Ollie. He was lying on the ground, reaching for her. Siggy forgot about the big storm for 1 second. She jumped out of bed. She ran towards Ollie. Boom! But the storm was still there. The walls still shook from thunder. Wind and rain still howled outside her window. Siggy's breathing felt like it was running. Her arms and legs felt like jello, and she fell to the ground. She was on her hands and knees. Siggy looked up and saw Ollie on the ground again. He was still reaching for her. But her room was still too loud and too bright. She felt stuck to the floor. Siggy curled up on the ground. She was crying. Her chest felt tight. Her heart was thumping loudly. Then she heard a gentle voice speak to her. No, she didn't hear the voice. Her body felt it. It was warm, strong, and loving. The voice reminded Siggy of her brother. She missed him so much. She felt the voice say 3 words. Ollie needs you. Siggy opened her eyes again. Her nose was runny, but her arms and legs were a little less shaky. Siggy uncurled from being a little ball on the floor. She sniffled as she got back up on her hands and knees. She grabbed the carpet really tight and tried to breathe. In. Out. In. Out. She ran towards Ollie again. Bright flashes of lightning tried to make her stop seeing Ollie. Loud booms of thunder tried to make her forget about Ollie. But Siggy wasn't going to listen to the storm anymore. She grabbed Ollie and ran back towards her room. She jumped into her bed. She pulled the covers up over both of them and held her red panda close. Siggy was shaking. Her breath was fast. Her heart was pounding. She squeezed Ollie close again. "Thank you, Siggy. You were so brave," his shaky voice whispered to her. "I wasn't brave." Siggy could barely talk. "I was scared." "You were brave to me," Ollie said as he squeezed her with a big hug. The storm was still there. The walls still shook. The fairy nightlight still flickered. Pictures still rattled on the wall. But Siggy and Ollie, they slept quietly, a smile on their faces as they cuddled together under the blanket. They didn't need the storm to stop. They only needed each other. And for the rest of the night, they had warm, quiet dreams. The end.
Morning. Our reading this morning is the last address that Dr. Martin Luther King gave to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And so I conclude by saying today that we have a task, and let us go out with a divine dissatisfaction. Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and anemia of deeds. Let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort from the inner city of poverty and despair shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. Let us be dissatisfied until those who live on the outskirts of hope are brought into the metropolis of daily security. Let us be dissatisfied until slums are cast into the junk heaps of history and every family will live in decent, sanitary homes. Let us be dissatisfied until the dark yesterdays of segregated schools will be transformed into bright tomorrows of quality integrated education. Let us be dissatisfied until integration is not seen as a problem, but as an opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. Let us be dissatisfied until men and women, however black they may be, will be judged on the basis of the content of their character, not on the basis of the color of their skin. And let us be dissatisfied until every state capital will be housed by a governor who will do justly, who will love mercy, and who will walk humbly with his or her God. Let us be dissatisfied until from every city hall, justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let us be dissatisfied until the day when the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every man will sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none will be afraid. Let us be dissatisfied, and men will recognize that out of one blood God made all men to dwell on the face of the earth. Let us be dissatisfied until that day when nobody will shout white power. And I must confess, my friends, that the road ahead will not always be smooth. There will still be rocky places of frustration and meandering points of bewilderment. There will be inevitable setbacks here and there will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transformed into the fatigue of despair. Our dreams will sometimes be shattered, our ethereal hopes blasted. We may again, with tear-drenched eyes, have to stand before the bier of some courageous civil rights worker whose life will be snuffed out by the dastardly acts of bloodthirsty mobs. But difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. Good morning. Well, I was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1956, which was the last year of the Montgomery bus boycott. Not that I ever learned anything about that growing up. I was raised in a 100% segregated environment. I was in a segregated church, segregated neighborhood, segregated schools. Racist remarks, jokes, racist terms were not only tolerated, they were encouraged. And that was the world that I was born into. There was not a single thing in my life that led me to progressive values, except for one thing, and that was books. And my journey to, yes, I like this word, becoming woke, is because frankly the term describes how I experience life. I woke up because of books initially. I read Dr. King's Why We Can't Wait. I didn't get it from our school library. It wouldn't have been permitted there. It certainly wasn't in my family's books, although my parents were readers. They didn't read Dr. King, sadly. And so when I read those books, it began to open my eyes and I started seeing the world. Now, unfortunately, I was taught, I was immersed in a culture of white supremacy. And so I was taught I was a better person than black people simply because of the accident of my birth. It's embarrassing to say that, but it's the truth. And frankly, even as I woke up, it didn't occur to me that fighting for justice for other people would be liberating and beneficial to me. But it has been. Now, books continue to be a key to me learning and us learning about the world. And one of those books that I've read in the last few years is Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us. And I want to share a few of the things that I learned from reading that book, and hopefully it inspires us as we struggle in this moment that we're in, this really, really dark moment that we're in. How do we fight together? How do we change this world that we are living in? Now, Heather McGhee grew up on the Chicago South Side. She received a BA in American Studies from Yale University, and then she went to UC Berkeley School of Law. And so law and history inform how she looks at the world. Now, one of the things that she talks about in this book is what she talks about as a zero-sum game. And she refers to, she asks this question, and why do so many people seem to blame the last folks in line for the American dream, black and brown people and new immigrants who've just started to glimpse when it became harder to reach for economic decisions? They actually had no power to determine. And so she goes on to quote some statisticians, and it says, it turns out the average white person views racism as a zero-sum game. If things are getting better for black people, it must be at the expense of white people. and cited surveys that white people, actually a majority, think that there is more prejudice now directed towards white people than before. It's just absurd that people believe that, but they do. So this idea of a zero-sum game results in loss for everybody. And she gives this example of something that actually I experienced in my own life. I grew up in Mobile. One of my joys was swimming. I loved to swim, and I swam because we were middle-class people. I very seldom swam in swimming pools. I didn't have access to swimming pools or country clubs or things like that. I swam in lakes. And I swam in Johnston's Lake, which was a spring-fed, really cold natural pool. And when they integrated it, they closed it. And so Ms. McGhee talks about the example of swimming pools in Alabama, that there were pools, public pools, all over. And it talks about the park system in Montgomery, Alabama, the Oak Park Pool, which was a jewel of the Parks Department, included a zoo, a community center, and a dozen other public parks. And the pool was for whites only until they were sued. The city of Montgomery was sued and forced to integrate the pool. What do you think they did? They closed the pool. So it says the reaction of the city was swift, effective January 1st, 1959, the Parks Department, the whole Parks Department would be no more. The council decided to drain the pool rather than share it with their black neighbors, and children watched as they poured dirt into the pool, paved it over, and seeded it with grass that was green by the time summer came. To defy desegregation, Montgomery would go on to close every single public park and padlock the doors of the community center. It even sold off the animals in the zoo. Well, who was harmed by that? Everyone was harmed by that. And so it's the proverbial cut off your nose to spite your face. Now, swimming pools I started to say they're a luxury unless you live in the deep south, in which case they're actually essential to life. But there are other examples of things that people have denied because it's perceived that something would improve the lives of black people. Government has and people have opposed those things to their own detriment. And the best example I know of that is medical care and health care. And so we see in our great state of Texas, Texas leads the country in rural hospital closures, with 26 hospitals permanently closing or whittling down services since 2010. The state has half the hospitals it had in the 1960s, and that's because Texas has refused to expand Medicaid because of this perception that it is going to be good for black people. We have refused to do something that was for the benefit of everyone. And of course, failing to insure so many people leaves a lot of unpaid medical bills in the state, drains Texas hospital system, and the conservative majority in the Texas legislature, we shouldn't use the word conservative, the radical majority in the Texas legislature has been so opposed to the idea of Medicaid, they shortchanged state hospitals in compensating for the few Medicaid patients they do see. So and you see this all over the country. The states that refused to expand Medicaid were the states that were formerly in the Confederacy. So there's the complete connection between racism, slavery, and the harm that gets inflicted on the whole state by a refusal to adopt policies that will be for the benefit of everyone. Why would they do that? Because it doesn't make any sense. They do it because of racism, which is just right below, really, I started to say below the surface, but it's not below the surface. It actually permeates the country and state that we live in, unfortunately. And there are other examples of that as well. Now, on the other hand, as opposed to the zero-sum game, there's what Ms. McGhee calls the solidarity dividend. And that is what would happen if we cut through that and actually work together for the common good. If we didn't have these, this is Ms. McGhee, if we didn't have these sharp divisions based on race, we could make enormous progress in terms of making sure that people are not hurting as badly as they are, deprived of what clearly are the necessity of life. I would like to think it was possible if we had a sense of social solidarity. Starting with healthcare and public colleges, I began to see solidarity dividends waiting to be unlocked if more people would stop buying the old zero-sum story that elites use to keep us from investing in each other. So that is a hopeful idea if we could only do it. Now, are there examples in our history of times when that happened? Well, as a matter of fact, there are. A friend suggested this book. I never remember the title because it's long. It says, Hillbilly Nationalists, Urban Race Rebels, and Black Power. So the idea of black power and hillbillies in the same sentence is a pretty astonishing one. But he talks about what happened in the 60s in Chicago. In July 1969, a dozen self-identified hillbillies showed up to a Black Panther Party conference in Oakland, California, with Confederate patches on their jean jackets. They went to the United Front Against Fascism conference. I think I'd like to go to that conference. So you had there, the 3-day conference drew more than 2,000 self-styled revolutionaries from across the nation. Black Panthers in their black berets and sleek leather jackets stood shoulder to shoulder with the Young Patriots, which were people these were people that had the descendants of the white Appalachians that moved to Chicago, just like blacks from the South moved in the Great Migration. Whites did that as well, came up for jobs. And so they had established this Southern culture in Chicago, and they formed a gang called the Young Patriots. They were there wearing the flag of the Confederacy, a symbol they soon discarded. They were there also with American Indian activists and the Young Lords, which was a Puerto Rican gang, and the members of the Chicano farm workers wearing the Aztec eagle. All of them there together. You would, and this is like, how many of you have ever heard the story of this original Rainbow Coalition? Yeah, I wonder why that is. Why is it that we have not studied in our history books times when black and white and brown people stood together to fight for justice together? Why do you think that's not in the books? Well, they don't want us to know it. They don't want us to look past these superficial differences and work together for justice. They don't want it. They're afraid of it. And that's what resulted. Fred Hampton was one of the Black Panthers that formed this, and the FBI infiltrated and killed him. So this is how powerful the idea of having a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-race movement to work for our common good. So I could go on and on with examples of this. I'll give one, and we'll give two. One of them is the fight for the minimum wage in New York City, where black and white and brown people fought together and looked past their differences to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. An even better example is my friend Noemi. If you could come up. My friend Noemi is going to talk to us about what's going on in our community where people are fighting together for change. You bet.
Welcome.
I'd have put on waterproof mascara if I knew you were going to make me cry. I'm so grateful to be here with you all today because you are choosing to use your free time on the weekends to come and listen to a talk like this. One thing that I have learned about the faith community is it truly is the place, and really I'm speaking of all faiths throughout the Metroplex, it really is the place that you go to find good-hearted people that take what they learn and then manifest it into the world. And I say this as somebody who grew up in a devout faith, as a child who was raised by essentially a pastor and a pastor's wife. I did choose to leave the faith when I was 16. There were so many things going on in the world, and I said, no way, I cannot subscribe to this. I'm going to find my own way in the world. Last year, I was on a sabbatical from work, and I chose, from looking out at the world, to use my time as a volunteer and organize and figure out where I could be useful based on what I knew was going to begin happening and what friends around me were telling me was going to come to Texas eventually. And I didn't know how I would go about recruiting folks to come and join me in being of service to my community. I also didn't necessarily know what being of service really meant in this environment. Where could I be of service? Where could I be most useful? It was a very short while after I learned through friends that at court, people who are going to comply with a process that they were given are showing up with their paperwork, dressed in their Sunday best, with their children, their wives, and they are being tackled as they walked out of this appointment where they were given some sort of result that generally either qualifies for a follow-up or some sort of delay, but never results in a warrant for an arrest. Never. 100% of the time, these folks do not walk out with a warrant for their arrest because they are not in a criminal court. Immigration court is not a criminal court. And yet this is happening in Dallas. I live in McKinney, by the way. So when I took my sabbatical, I knew that it meant driving to Dallas every day. Every day. You guys know what that traffic is like. And I only had 6 months. I had a limited amount of time. So in addition to figuring out where I could be of service, it would be also important for me to have an exit strategy to get back to my corporate career and identify folks that would lean into this mission and continue to show up simply to be a kind presence in an environment that is manufactured to be very hostile for our neighbors. And it was in the faith communities. And I say this because I am absolutely in awe that at 16 years old, when I said I would never step another foot in a church, last year, I was basically in a church every single weekend. Every single weekend I was in a church, and not because of the faith that is practiced, but truly because of the actions that are practiced by those communities. So I can't quite say where I'm at yet in my journey of faith, but I can say that every time that I'm able to be in a community like this, it restores my faith in humanity that yes, there's a bigger purpose. Maybe I don't have it figured out. Maybe every faith has a little bit of truth in their interpretation of what's our purpose in life. I want to read something to you, and then I'm going to give it back to Bill. A poem, since I'm not sure where I'm at right now in my faith journey, but I'm very, very, very inspired by the faith communities of Dallas and the clergy of all faiths in Dallas, whom, by the way, stand every Monday morning in front of the ICE field office, where virtually 100% of the people there are also abducted for showing up to their appointments. So you got 10 minutes apart, you have the Dallas Immigration Court at the Earl Cabell Federal Court Building. 10 minutes away, you've got the field office off of Stemmons, where the tragic shooting happened last year, the inhumane conditions that we helped to bring light to. In both of these spots, Dallas ICE agents are picking up low-hanging fruit. So if you wonder why it's not like Minnesota out here, why it's not like Chicago, why it's not like LA, they don't have to spend that many calories to hit their numbers out here. They target folks that are compliant. They don't have to do as much. They probably also looking at the politics of the situation and saying, let's not get the public outraged. But if you showed up on Monday mornings with the clergy, if you have the opportunity, show up, let them tell you the stories of the families that are ripped apart. Folks who have dialysis appointments, folks who've just gotten out of major surgery and require medication, folks who are diabetic are taken. No regard for their health needs whatsoever. So yes, folks are dying in custody of ICE. They are dying. Let me get back to this little poem that restores me when I'm feeling a little hopeless. You were created to do good work. Work that empowers and inspires, liberates and transforms, restores and softens. Yes, work can be hard, as it was meant to be. The verb itself calls us into action, rejecting passivity and demanding sustained effort. It provokes, agitates, and disturbs. But this work, the call for justice, is good work. It defends the oppressed and frees the captive. It tears down walls and destroys barriers. It changes things. So when you're feeling weary or hopeless or spent, remind yourself that the darkness is being flooded by marvelous light. Yes, this is work, and it is good. Thank you so much, Bill.
So Noemi, if people want to be involved, what's the first thing they should do?
Oh, yeah, I didn't even talk about. Our name is Vecinos Unidos, DFW, which stands for Neighbors United in Dallas-Fort Worth. As you just heard, we got our start last year very organically. Nobody is paid to do this, so if you join us, it would be at your discretion what time you can give. Court is Monday through Friday. We will have orientations on a monthly basis. We just had one yesterday at First Presbyterian Church in Dallas. If your congregation is interested in having us come out and talk a little bit about what it means to show up in accompaniment for our immigrant neighbors, please let me know. We would be thrilled to come out and have that kind of talk for this congregation. But you can follow us on all of the social media platforms to stay tuned in to when that next orientation will take place. And of course, I'd be thrilled to come back here as well. Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
Perfect.
Bill.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you. My wife is a wonderful human being, but she's a school teacher and she gets discouraged, and because she's not around activists very often, and so hanging out, knowing people like Noemi, people who are fighting for change, it's really the only thing that keeps me going and charged and hopeful. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to end my remarks with the end of Heather McGhee's book. And she says, since this country's founding, we have not allowed our diversity to be our superpower. And the result is that the United States is not more than the sum of its disparate parts, but it could be. And if it were, all of us would prosper. In short, we must emerge from this crisis in our republic with a new birth of freedom rooted in the knowledge that we are so much more than the we in we the people. It's not some of us, but all of us. We are greater for the sum of us. Thank you.
As our worship time this morning draws to a close, it's time to extinguish our chalice. Please join me now in reciting these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our benediction this morning is also from the Reverend Dr. Rebekah Savage. We have come to the end of our service, but not our calling in the world. we close our time together with the humble reminder that justice and equity are our spiritual practices to embrace each day, every day. Each day, every day, we are blessed to be the embodiment of what is possible. When justice and equity ground us in all that we do, we can go forth with the light and warmth of our chalice in our hearts. Amen.